Hey, I wanted to make a quick video about a discussion that occurred during the live stream I did with Alex the other day. And one of the topics that came up was a question from a viewer of the stream who was talking about a story that they had seen on video about a Texas couple where the guy had approximately $20,000 in savings, and it was computed as income, and his child support was raised. Now, the first thing about this that I really want to hit is there is always more to a story. This is critically important because whenever you're looking at your situation and you're trying to determine what may or may not happen, oftentimes you'll take these little tidbits of information, these little sound bites, and then try to incorporate it into what that means in your own life. Now, hopefully, if I can figure out how to do this, Alex and I'll do a live stream where maybe we'll be able to deep dive into this particular video. But the premise of this video that I want to hit is you have to be incredibly careful how you look at a situation. And the problem is that you can take, like I mentioned a minute ago, you can take those little tidbits of info and think, oh my God, it's completely unfair. I'm going to get completely hosed. This is going to happen to me. And there's always more to the story. Now, the other problem with this is you can turn around and use that on the opposite side, where when someone's trying to say, oh, my ex is a narcissist and they're evil and they're toxic, you can make the mistake of saying, well, not the mistake, but that can be used too, right? There could be more to the story. You really don't know. And the main point of this, or the real point of this discussion right now, is taking a deeper dive to really look at the details of what's going on. For instance, if somebody is saying, I'm the victim, it's all them. Well, is it? Look at it, right? I mean, for the most part, anything that you can take an objective look at and put a little bit more scrutiny into, you're going to see what's really going on in the story. That's important because this works pretty much on everything. None of us should take anything at face value, because what are the details? What is the nuance of what's being discussed? Now, in this particular story, when I watch it, and it was hard to watch, right? I mean, it's hard to watch a vindictive ex who's just trying to beat the other person out of money, and just the back and forth that's going on, primarily in this particular video by the mom. The guy is just like wants it to be over with. But the detail of that particular story, yes, the guy had $20,000 that he'd saved up and put in the account, but this was a mediation session. The mediator basically was like, well, how much do you have? He's like, I have this. And never said another word. Didn't say it was a windfall. It was a gift. It was, I'm making the same amount of money and I just sacrificed. So there's a lot of nuances in that story that didn't make a lot of sense. Maybe the guy made 50 grand and he saved, he paid whatever he was paying in child support, which was court determined in the state of Texas. So he was paying what he was ordered to pay, and the mom in this particular situation was asking for a modification. The person didn't say anything other than, I have this money here, and they said, okay, well, then you obviously made $20,000 more, and no other information. So effectively, if the guy didn't argue it correctly, then maybe let's say he was making $50,000 a year and he saved that money. Well, now they're calculating his child support on $70,000. They added that $20,000 into it, plus gave some other offsets and stuff. Looking at that story, I'm watching it going, what in the world is this guy doing? I mean, obviously this was kind of like a pseudo television reality show. So I don't know what the detail is. I don't know all the facts behind the story, but just on face value, that was approached really wrong. And they didn't go to court and argue anything. The person basically said, "You were paying $100 a month. Now you're going to pay $600. Are you okay with that?" And he said, "Yes, fine. Where do I sign? I want to get out of here." That is not, that particular part of the story has to come out. You have to understand the details of what's going on. That's why so often when someone says, something happened, I lost custody of my kids. And this happens a lot on this channel where someone will say, I got harpooned by the evaluator or whatever. And when I deep dive into it, most of the time, not always, but most of the time, the person will admit to a catastrophic mistake. They will admit to taking the bait. They will admit to when they were provoked, they responded in a negative way. Their ex was able to grab that, use it against them, and change the tide in the entire family court system. There's always more to the story. We can be our own worst enemies. We can make significant, catastrophic mistakes that completely send our entire process down a different path. This can happen because our ex does things that derail us. This can also occur whenever we make poor decisions with our interaction with our children and ultimately alienate them. Or another possibility is whenever they're being parentally alienated and we aren't helping the situation. We are still falling into the narrative of what the ex is trying to say, so that the child is basically thinking, okay, well, one parent, parent A is more right than parent B, and parent B makes me really scared, so I have a little bit more stability with parent A. Granted, they're being manipulated, but let's just, for the sake of argument, that's kind of what happens. There's always more to the story. There's always more to even your own situation. You have to take an objective look on how you got to the situation you're at. For instance, I could go around in the beginning part of this saying I'm, a dedicated father, which I was, and I loved my kids, which I did or do. But the reactions or the actions that I was taking, which were also partly reactions, didn't help my narrative. It didn't help convince anybody, especially my kids, that I was a changed person, that I wasn't following the old script, that I wasn't doing the same thing. Again, there's more to the story, right? So I had to change my reactions and my approaches that I was doing with myself and absolutely with the kids to start to affect change. Again, going back to the story, and I really hope that Alex and I can do a deep dive on this, but going back to the story of this person whose savings account was imputed basically as income, there's colossal mistakes that were made in that mediation. And, that type of stuff happens. It happens a lot. Like I said in the beginning of this, time and time again, I've had discussions with people where they'll say the sky is blue, or the answer should have been 5 or whatever, and then you start deep diving into the situation and you start hearing the mistakes that were made or little details that were left out. When we're going through this, you have to be incredibly honest, at least with yourself, on what's going on. I'm not saying that you need to beat yourself up. You need to, curl up into a little ball, crawl under your desk, and rock back and forth with what you may or may not have done, right? What's in the past is in the past. The important part is what happened, what can you do better, and how can you start affecting significant positive change going forward. Again, there's always more to the story. That doesn't mean that your outcome is written. That doesn't mean you're completely lost. Now, every time we make a mistake, it makes things a little bit more complicated. It makes things a lot more complicated. And depending on what those mistakes are, and depending on what the ramifications of those mistakes are, you may have a more difficult road to hoe. It doesn't mean everything is lost, though. You know, it's just at some point you take a pause and you say, okay, here's my situation. How do I deal with it objectively and detached from the emotion as much as possible, so that I can make the best decisions for me and for anyone who's around me, if you still have your kids around you, to start rebuilding your life. Now, here's the other part about this, which is really significant. You have to remember. A toxic ex is going to do everything in their power to make you feel pain and not get away. In this particular story that we were discussing, and it starts out with a narrative on it, the ex was, or the mom in that situation was super angry that he wasn't paying his fair share. And somebody told her that he had money in the bank. And how dare he be able to save that kind of money while I'm struggling? You know, you need to be struggling and you need to be unhappy and you need to be my slave, right? I mean, that was the premise on this. And to be perfectly honest, most of the time when you're dealing with a toxic ex, whether it is an ex-wife or an ex-husband, or even if it's the same, whatever, it doesn't matter. If that toxic person has you in their sights, in their crosshairs, they are going to work to drive yourself to drive yourself crazy. You need to hold on to your information and be close hold with it until you're done with family court. Anybody who is prior service and spent time in the military more than likely knows about OPSEC, which is operational security. What that doctrine is basically saying is you keep your mouth shut about what the operations are going and you don't leak it to the enemy. You don't post it on Facebook. You don't write about it to people. You don't talk about it on the phone. You don't go out to coffee with your buddy in a public place and start discussing what's going on. All of that mentality, all of that information is absolutely relevant for our situations. When Debbie and I are out in public in this small little town that I live in, when there's other people around, I have no idea who may or may not be associated, friends, acquaintances with my ex or with the ex. I am very cautious with what I say. I am not going to sit there and say in a public place, my YouTube channel has got X amount of things and I'm doing blah, 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 blah. And I'm just bought this and I'm putting money here and we're planning for a trip. I don't do that. You shouldn't do that either. It doesn't mean you have to not live. You have to take appropriate steps to hide to keep close hold information, close hold. There's no reason, like in that particular story we're talking about, nobody needed to know that this guy had $20,000 in a savings account. That was stupid. And, who knows who it is? It could be somebody at the bank. It could be somebody who's using privileged information. It could be a friend that we've talked about this in the past, where you have those mutual friends. Do not trust mutual friends. Do not share anything with somebody that you don't expect them to share with your ex. It's not worth it. And when you're dealing with a toxic ex, when you're dealing with somebody who is vindictive, who is evil, who is hell-bent on making you pay and making your life hell, you do not want to give them any other information. I've talked often about how I close hold info, and I absolutely try to present to my ex that I am a disgruntled, bitter, angry person, because then she's happy. Because then it's filling her narrative on what things are, and she's not looking for extra stuff. When my ex found out that I was dating a year after the divorce, she freaked out and tried to make the situation as hellacious as possible. And she was very effective in that. Later, whenever We were going to a wedding for Debbie's daughter. The ex did everything in her power to insert herself as much as she could in the process. She was even wanting to bring stuff up to us for the kids just so that the kids would be thinking about her. It's that type of stuff. Now, granted, in that situation, you're not going to. I mean, there's certain things you can't, hold or close hold. I mean, at some point, it's going to come out. I mean, you got to be mindful of that. But just realize, like I said in the beginning of this, there's more most of the time to the story. Even with your own story, look at it objectively. Think about where you're at, how you've gotten there, and steps that you can take to take back your life and try to minimize the impact of a toxic person as much as possible. You can do that. You can outsmart a narcissist. You can do things to keep them at bay, to keep them thinking that they're winning, focused on their own little drama and chaos, and spending the least amount of time messing with you. I've been pretty effective on that. And I get at some point that's going to blow up in my face, but I am doing everything in my power to try to minimize that as much as possible. The last thing I want to leave you with on this is, if you are listening to these other stories and you're hearing these horror stories, whatever it is, it could be somebody who's like, oh my God, Bill went to jail, to debtor's prison because he's behind in child support. There's probably more to it. I mean, is there basically some truth into that? Yeah, probably. But maybe the person made a bunch of colossal mistakes, and that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be you. You need to make damn sure that you're not making a bunch of colossal mistakes to get yourself into that situation, or start making decisions which make that an inevitable outcome. But for the most part, if you slow yourself down and make some really thoughtful decisions on how you're dealing with stuff, things will turn out okay. They may not be the best. They may not be exactly how you would like it to be. It may not be the numbers that you expect, or the time, or with the assets, or whatever the heck it is that's important. It may not be what you would hope, or what you think would be fair, that you think would be fair, but it's probably not going to be catastrophic either. I've been doing this a long time, and a lot of the people on this channel, there's not too many people who have been here on the channel and then continue to make colossal mistakes and get themselves in a bad way. Now, granted, there are people who make those mistakes, show up here, and then they're like, oh crap, how do I get beyond it? And we work on that. But calming yourself down, focusing on how you respond and the decisions you make is critical and is key. I'm going to wrap this up. Do the stuff you're supposed to do, subscribe, like, share, and I'll catch you on the next video. Take care. Bye.